Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's conclude the wonderful book, Mysterious Monsters, Fact or Fiction. It is that time. All good things must come to an end, and after showcasing this book for who knows how many months, delving into so many wonderful little mini parts associated within the book, talking about all manners of cryptids, both on the pro and the con side, meaning those that believe the cryptids are real and those that believe that they are a hoax. It all finally comes to an end here. This will be chapter 2, part 6, which will actually delve into two mini little chapters as well. But yes, it'll definitely wrap up this book altogether. But let me know what you guys and gals think about this final part here. It's definitely sad to end this wonderful book, but once this finishes, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions and then start focusing on another new Cryptids and Monster book. So again, this one delves into two little mini parts. The first one is one involving the idea of giant birds not being the remnants of the dinosaur age. And then the last part actually goes into a fan favorite, the one involving the Dover Demon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's share this final part here. And then that's it. This will wrap up the book in of itself. So the first mini part is called this: Giant birds are not remnants of the dinosaur age. So let's start this and then I'll finish the book right after this part here. So here's what it says. Numerous people in different parts of the world have reported seeing gigantic birds that do not seem to belong to the typical bird species in their areas. Often, witnesses are convinced that these birds are pterodactyls, which scientists say died out with the dinosaurs. Carl P. N. Schucker, author of the following article, argues that the giant bird sightings can be explained by known bird species. The article briefly describes several sightings and Schucker's belief about what witnesses actually saw. Schucker is a zoologist and has studied ordinary and not so ordinary animals for the past 20 years. He's the author of several books, including Dragons, A Natural History, and also In the Search of Prehistoric Survivors, Do Giant Extinct Creatures Still Exist? So here's what he wrote. Many cryptozoological publications have included eyewitness accounts of mysterious winged dragon-like beasts reported from Africa and the USA that resemble living representatives of those familiar flying reptiles from prehistory known as pterosaurs, typically typified by the pterodactyls. Less well known, however, is that these creatures' files also contain several reports emanating from far beyond those geographical confines. Richard Greenwell, Secretary of the International Society of Cryptozoology, has a Mexican correspondent who claims that there are living pterosaurs in eastern Mexico and is determined to capture one to prove beyond any shadow of the doubt that they do exist. Worthy of note is that certain depictions of deities, demons, and strange beasts from ancient Mexican mythology are decidedly pterodactylian in appearance. One particularly intriguing example is the mysterious serpent bird portrayed in relief sculpture amid the Mayan ruins of Tajín in Veracruz's northeast portion, noted in 1968 by visiting Mexican archaeologist Dr. Jose Diaz Bolio and dating from a mere 1,000 to 5,000 years ago. Yet all the pterosaurs had officially become extinct at least 64 million years ago. So how do we explain the Mayan serpent bird, a non-existent imaginary beast, or a creature lingering long after its formal date of demise? Although neither solution would be unprecedented, only one is correct. But which one? So around February 1947, Jay Harrison from Liverpool was on a boat navigating an estuary of the Amazon River when he and others aboard actually spied a flock of 5 huge birds flying overhead in a V formation with long necks and beaks, and each with a wingspan of about 12 feet. According to Harrison, however, their wings resembled brown leather and appeared to be featherless. As they soared down the river, he could see that their heads were flat on top and the wings seemed to be ribbed. And judging from the sketch that he prepared, however, they bore little resemblance to pterosaurs and were far more reminiscent of a large stork, 3 of which, the jabiru, maguey, and wood ibis, are native here. A bird is also more likely than a pterosaur to be an explanation for the blue-winged red pterodactyl spied flying with an undulating motion over a new motorway in New Zealand sometime prior to 1982. If such a conspicuously colored beast was remarkably pterosonian in appearance, there would surely have been other sightings on the road, but none has so far been brought to cryptozoological attention. One morning in July 1987 or thereabouts, near a small river in Kretz and Stasoria Mountains, three youngsters allegedly spied what looked at first like a giant dark gray bird flying low towards the mountains. As it approached them, however, they could see that its wings were membranous, like those of a bat, with finger-like projections. It also had a pelican-like beak and clawed feet. After poring through several books, they learned that the animal bearing the closest resemblance to their mystery beast was the pterodactyl. Last and least is the infamous French pterodactyl that supposedly emerged, weak but nonetheless alive, from out of a hollow boulder blasted apart during the excavation of a new railway tunnel at Coulmouth, according to an illustrated London news report from February 9th, 1856. As soon as it took its first breath of air, however, it promptly expired. Here, therefore, was a true prehistoric survivor, not Armando, a descendant of an ancient line, but a bona fide prehistoric creature that has somehow survived in suspended animation for more than 64 million years. When his body was examined by an anonymous expert, he was able to identify its species very precisely, Pterodactyl anus. Yet amazingly, nothing more was ever heard of this zoologically priceless specimen. In reality, of course, there is no such species, and there was never such specimen either, but none of this could come as any surprise to any linguistically minded, for whom all the clues for deciphering the true nature of this tall tale are readily available. After all, anus is Latin for duck, which in French, the pterodactyl was found in France, is canard, a word for a very different meaning in English, a false report. Then that's it for that mini chapter. This was the last chapter then that we're going to discuss from this book. It says the Dover demon likely was a moose. So here's what it says. When experienced investigators examine cases involving mysterious monsters, they often find that there is a simple explanation. Witnesses have simply mistaken something ordinary for something extraordinary. A trick of light and shadows makes one thing look like something else. A misjudgment of distance makes something appear to be gigantic when it really is not. Was the Dover demon such a case? The Dover demon is a puzzling creature that appeared in only one place, Dover, Massachusetts, during one weekend in 1977, but it remains a part of the area's mysterious lore. The Dover demon was reported by a credible witness to be a big-headed, red-eyed beast of unfamiliar form. The witnesses were sure they had seen a monster, but had they? Martin S. Kottmeyer thinks they may have seen something much more ordinary, a baby moose. In the following article, he examines the witnesses' accounts to see if they could fit such a prosaic explanation. Kottmeyer is an investigator of paranormal phenomenon and the author of many articles on paranormal topics. So here's what he says. Something mysterious and disturbing happened in Dover, Massachusetts in April 1977. Over a period of 2 nights, 4 people in 3 locations saw a smallish beast with a peculiar head shaped more or less like a watermelon. Bill Bartlett, the first witness, said it had eyes that glowed a bright orange. His sketch showed a creature standing on 4 spindly limbs that each ended in long fingers that splayed over some rocks it seemed posed on. It had a slender torso and a neck that looked inadequate to the task of holding that head. It acquired the catchy tag, the Dover Demon. This was presumably inspired by the glowing eyes. The creature, neither in Bartlett's encounter nor their subsequent sightings by John Baxter, Abby Brabham, and Will Tainter, ever did anything remotely malevolent beyond simply existing. It didn't abduct anyone or perform nasty things on anyone's bodies. Basically, it just stood, moved a little, and then it wasn't seen. Curiously, its defining trait, the eyes, is the object of the most blatant contradictions among the witnesses. Baxter did not remark on the eyes glowing drawing at all. Abby Brabham maintained the eyes glowed bright green in contrast to Bartlett's orange, even upon being questioned closely by the investigators on the point. The larger problem with the tag is that in devil lore, the devil's eyes typically glowed red. Still, if it wasn't a demon, then what was it? All four witnesses thought what they saw was an unknown terrestrial animal that had previously gone undetected in Dover's dense woods. A neighbor suggested it was a fox, disfigured by a disease which makes foxes swell up and lose hair. Comments by witnesses that it was the size of a monkey apparently led to thoughts that the Dover demon was an escaped lab animal. Nobody came forward to identify it, however. The drawings and descriptions are correctly used to dismiss the ideas. Most people familiar with the kids felt they saw something. The father of the tainter teen had the sense that it was a conventional animal of some sort, but it somehow got mistaken for the demon. Though awkwardly expressed, I think he had the right idea. I got the impression from the testimony that there was probably a real animal at the root of things, but it was seen briefly or in poor circumstances that didn't give enough visual detail to form a proper gestalt and give a firm identification. Investigators determined Bartlett saw it in headlights for only 5 or 6 seconds. Brabham and Tainter were driving past it and caught a glimpse in the headlights for maybe 5 seconds. Baxter saw it for a matter of minutes, but he was walking in darkness, and the optimal moment of observation consisted of a silhouette against an open field. Bartlett's drawing seems bizarre at first consideration, but the basic body plan is not unusual. 4 limbs, a torso, a neck, a head, and 2 eyes. It is fundamentally the shape of the head and the unfamiliar proportions of the various elements that prove most confusing. My attention eventually focused on the long head and thin legs as leading the way to an unconsidered alternative explanation. It faintly reminded me of a moose. The small size and absence of horns could mean it could be quite young, perhaps a yearling recently weaned in advance of the mother giving an April birth. Dig out the wildlife guides and test out the details. A moose calf has legs relatively longer than the adult. Its coat is light colored with a dark muzzle and marks over the eyes. It lacks a shoulder hump. Moose live only in densely forested areas, usually near shallow lakes or swamps. They have short necks and tend to graze on shrubs and trees. If a tree is small, they may straddle it with their front legs, trying to break it down. They are particularly fond of the upper bark of aspens. They also like ground juniper, a type of yew called shintangle. They have no fear of the ooze of the swamps and will swim in lakes to feed on water lilies and other water-growing plants. Their range in the U.S. includes all of New England down to Pennsylvania. Bartlett's placing of the eyes matches the placement of the eyes just above the hip of the muzzle on the moose's head. The lack of a discernible nose and mouth is easily laid to the fact that nostrils and mouth are very far down on the muzzle. A drawing of a young moose presents the ears swept back along the line of the head and would not discernibly stick out, thus accounting for the absence of visible ears. The skin was described as hairless, with something like dirt smudged on it, and appeared to be the rough texture of a shark. My guess is that it had emerged from a nearby lake and was still wet. Bartlett and Brabham believed it must be a water creature of some kind, since it was seen not far from the water in all 3 instances. Bartlett said it was a peach color. Brabham and Tainter said it was a beige or tan. This is roughly consistent with the lighter reddish-brown coat of a young moose. Bartlett also said that the tint was lighter, almost whitish, near the hands. This is true of moose legs generally. Barnum and Trader said the facial area around the eyes were lighter as well. This could be the marks over the eyes of the young mentioned in the guide. Finally, Bartlett and Brabham and Tainter commented on the possible absence of a tail, though by their own admission the angle might have hid it. Moose have tails that are short and flat and lay against the haunches in a manner that would probably render them too indistinct to be noticed at first glance. The most blatant objection will be the long fingers at the bottom of the limbs on Bartlett's drawing. They obviously aren't standard equipment on moose. Indeed, there are not many animals with such long fingers on both front and back pairs of limbs which come to mind. Bipeds aren't built like that, let alone quadrupeds. My thought is that these maybe vines caught in the hooves, torn, and then dragged in lake mud. Baxter spoke of fingers being molded around the top of a rock during his sighting, and this seems more suggestive of wet vegetation than articulated appendages. Against this, Baxter's drawing shows fingers wrapped around a tree. The proximity to the tree hints at moose feeding habits, and it might be attempting a straddling posture to either reach leaves or bend the tree down. It also invites reflection about the humanoid solution. Do aliens eat trees? Do they like to hug trees? There seems to be no precedent for such behavior in the UFO literature, either prior to or subsequent to this case. It seems puzzlingly unique. It could be the wrapping of the fingers was an interpolated detail arising from a vague sense of what the creature was doing in the dark. A last problem that should be addressed are the glowing eyes. The glow was evidently eye shine associated with automobile headlights. Bartlett and Brabham and Tainter were using cars and saw it. Baxter, who was walking, did not. The fact that Bartlett reported orange sunshine and Brabham a bright green is not a serious objection against the case. Personal experience and experiments with cattle have proven to me that one can get a range of colors in eye shine spreading from orange to yellow to bright green, even in a given individual animal. The color changes with movement of either the head or the light source to different angles. Typically, both eyes change together, though at unusual angles, one can get different shades of eye shine from the two eyes separately. Could the same be true of moose? In The Deer of North America, Leonard Leroux III states that deer also display a range of color in their eye shine, spanning red, orange, yellow, and green. The eye acts as a prism as the light hits the cones of the eyes and bounces back through the retina. As moose are considered to be belonging to the same zoological family as deer, the same principle doubtless applies. Data specifically on eye shine in moose proved too obscure to locate. I don't consider this solution as having full certitude, and I hope this need not be emphasized. I assert only that the solution is better than the alternatives. I think a moose makes a better explanation of the details of the report and avoids the inevitable problems of invoking supernatural entities. Even good mysteries can have prosaic solutions. And then that's it. That's finally everything. That wraps up Chapter 2, Part 6, involving the wonderful book, Mysterious Monsters, Fact or Fiction. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. For starters, the first little mini part was about giant birds not being remnants of the dinosaur age. Here, this author was describing that many of the pterodactyls or pterosaurs that people see are more likely large birds that are seen just moments, like just fractions of a second at most, and then maybe even a little more at best. And then what happens is people undoubtedly think that they are dinosaurs, that they are some long-lost dinosaurs. But he was saying over several examples, including it being a blue-winged reddish type bird, and then others being reminiscent of the Jabiru, Mogwai, and wood ibis, in other words, being natural creatures. That was his argument. I did see a fascinating one that he mentioned an example there in France involving something that emerged that looked like a pterodactyl from a cave. Apparently there was an excavation being done of a railway tunnel. There was an explosion to do that part of the tunnel, and then out emerged this actual dinosaur. But despite it being examined, and even though it was dead after one single breath, there was no evidence of it afterward. Nobody kept it in anywhere. Nobody took the bones. Nothing. It just seemingly just disappeared afterwards. So what a horrible situation. If that would have been the closest to a real life dinosaur in terms of proof, it was literally right there and then it's gone. Like nobody took the preemptive measures to keep it around in some way afterward. And then the final chapter was about the Dover demon. As you saw, there was multiple points by the author indicating that it was a moose. Apparently, a baby moose has that type of head. They have no arching back. Their eyes can also do that eye shine that apparently either catches headlights or catches moonlight and then causes people to think that it looks like reddish eyes, or in some cases different color eyes depending on the angle. And then they were stating that the size of it, being a monkey, is also the size of baby or newly born type, I guess, moose. And then also the fact that there's the area that it was found near water is also tends to be the areas that moose tend to be as well. But the question that I have, the thing that stood out the most still, were the infamous long fingers that the Dover demon was known for. It seemed like all three witnesses mentioned something like that. The fact that this author was then stating that it could have been some kind of grass or weed or something else in terms of vine that was wrapping around the hooves, and then that in turn wrapped around the areas that this quote unquote Dover demon was, but it was really a moose. It was a stretch. Like you can kind of get away with the other stuff, with the eyes and maybe the skin and then the bulbous head and then no back and so on. But having long fingers and the witnesses stating that they saw those long fingers wrapped around certain branches and certain trees, like that's kind of hard to dismiss. It's a different, even if it was involving vines and other type of vegetation, people would have seen the hooves somewhere around there too. Like hooves and long fingers are completely different from each other, and they would have stood out. So that's the only blatant thing that I think proves everything wrong. But who knows? I could be wrong altogether, but let me know what you guys and gals think. That's it. That wraps up the Mysterious Monsters Fact or Fiction book. I'm going to go ahead and pick another book soon to feature in the world of cryptids and monsters, so be on the lookout for that sometime later on. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.